Hey everyone, thanks for joining us today. I'm Todd Marshall Hernsberger, and I'm the host of this podcast called Todd Talk, and I'm also the founder of Leadwell Solutions. So we're glad you're here with us today. And today we're going to be talking with someone who I know extremely well. Mark, we've known each other. Well, Stefan and I have been married for 30 years and a few days, and I dated your sister for 2 years. So I'd say 32 years I've known you, and of course by now, those of you who are listening and connecting the dots, Mark is my brother-in-law, and he is a pastor of Infinite Church in New Albany, Ohio, which is a suburb of Columbus, Ohio. And so, Mark, welcome. Glad you're here.
I'm honored to be with you. It's going to be fun.
It will be fun. We're going to have a blast today. And so, Mark, you are a pastor of Infinite Church. And for those who want to know the website, I will put it at the bottom here so that you can always reference and be able to go find his church online if you want to know more about Mark and his church there. But it's what is your website?
InfiniteChurch.org.
Infinitechurch.org. Okay, infinitechurch.org. And Mark, you're also a songwriter and a worship leader. You've done many years of worship leading. You've wrote many, many songs that many churches around the world has been singing. And I've even heard many of your songs or some of your songs in other languages, which is kind of cool to hear. So
Yeah.
kind of tell everybody about your church and a little bit about that and your worship history and all of that.
All right. Well, again, thank you for letting me be on your podcast. For many, many years, most of my adult life, I was a worship leader, producer, arranger, and created music for the church. And did that forever. Traveled around the country almost every week of my life for 20 years, working with different churches, and then about longer than that. Then God began to deal with me and about pastoring, and I really struggled with that because I just could not really assess what the agenda was. Was this something I'm thinking I'm supposed to do? Is it something God's asking me to do? And wrestled with that for several years, actually. But then we did. We planted Infinite Church. This coming Sunday is 11 years since we planted Infinite Church,
I
and it's
remember
been
you
quite a
planning the
journey. Yeah.
church.
What's that?
I remember you planning the church. I can't believe
Yeah.
it's been 11 years.
Yeah. It is definitely, some days it feels like we just started yesterday, and other days it feels like we've been doing this forever. But God has blessed us and got a great group of people and an amazing community. And so, yeah, it's been a wonderful journey.
So, you have a family, obviously. Carol is your wife of how many years?
We have been married a little over 39 years, and we
39.
have 4 children, and we have 6 grandchildren and 2 on the way. So,
That's fabulous. A growing
yeah.
family. So, one of your newest big things that just happened that came out, and really, I'm going to show this. He is now an author. This is his new book called Endless Possibilities. I would probably think the ink may be still wet in this. It's that fresh off the press. So, briefly tell everyone what is this about and what inspired you to write it?
Okay. So last year, right after our 10-year anniversary, we went on vacation. And about 3 days in, I had really thought about writing a book, over the last several years. In fact, even started several times. And I get about 2 or 3 chapters in. I'm thinking, I'm not sure this is any good. I don't think I'm going to go any further. But this time, God began to really download in my heart to write the book. And, we just wrapped up 10 years of planting Infinite Church. And so I begin to, the book is Endless Possibilities, and the subtitle is The Power of the Nudge. And I really talk about how God has dealt with me and talked with me over the years. So many years you hear people say, God told me this, God told me to go do this, God, spoke to me and said this. And that always bothered me because I really felt like God never talked to me. And I kind of wondered, why won't God talk to me? And, there's been times that I've had strong impressions and, I thought, well, I believe God wants me to do this. In fact, planting Infinite Church was one of those. But it was about 2 years. I'd like to tell you, I learned this way earlier in my life, but it was about 2 years into planting Infinite that I really realized how God speaks to me and that he had been speaking to me all along, but I just didn't recognize how he spoke to me. And I believe that God speaks to me, and I believe that God speaks to many people the same way, and that is through ideas, through intuitions, through instincts, through what I call nudges. They're small. For example, God may say, God may plant an idea of somebody that you haven't even been thinking about it. And all of a sudden, this person pops up in your brain, and you think, man, I'm going to just text them and see how they're doing. And I would say, well, then, so you text that person, then they respond back to you and they say, you have no idea how timely your text was.
Mhm.
And I would say that is a nudge. That is God speaking to you and using you to encourage, uplift. I don't think all ideas are God ideas. I think the enemy can give ideas, but I think ideas that build the kingdom, encourage people, uplift people are often God ideas or God speaking to us. And so if the book is really a faith book and it's about how Carol and I have followed these nudges through our entire life of ministry, whether it was worship ministry or now pastoring ministry, and there is obedience when you obey those nudges. So on the other side of obedience, there are what I call endless possibilities. And I share so many personal stories of how God has blessed us through the years, all because we obeyed an idea or a nudge.
Wow. That's very powerful in the fact that we always want God to speak to us in this powerful, even sometimes audible voice to where it's like he hits us across the head. But many times, God doesn't talk to us like that. It's in the quiet, still voice of God, these nudges that we make.
Yeah.
I even sometimes say that God winks at us. God winks, and He kind of doesn't say anything, but He in my life He has done God winks and let me know I was on the right path or I'm doing the right thing. So that's powerful. So how can people get a hold of this book if they're interested in getting it?
They can go to Amazon. They can go to Barnes and Noble, any place really. I think that you can order books. I think it's there. And so, yeah. And I actually am just wrapping up this Sunday. I'm wrapping up a sermon series called Endless Possibilities. And it's really, I've taken just a few of the principles, and they can get that on Infinite Church YouTube and catch up on some of those messages if they would like. But I truly believe that the book is a faith building book. And when we learn to flex that faith muscle over the little things, then God trusts us for bigger things. And
Absolutely.
so it's learning how to lean into those little nudges. And often we have, at least we want to have faith for, the big hospital thing that we hear, or the big financial bill that comes our way. We try to build our faith for those, but God's trying to get us to walk by faith every day of our lives. So, hey, who will you walk across the room to talk to if God says, hey, look at that person over there? Why don't you go speak to them? Do we obey those nudges? And how often do we not obey those nudges and we don't ever get to reap the benefits or the blessings that God had in store for us by not obeying those?
Yeah, so good. So if you're interested in this book, go to those sources. I'll put it down at the bottom of the screen here where you can find this and go get his book. So, Mark, let's
Yes.
talk about leadership. That's my motto of this podcast is all things leadership, the good, the bad, and even the ugly. I know we don't like to always talk about the ugly, but that is sometimes we have to deal with the ugliness side of that as well. But I want to talk today with you especially from your perspective of being a pastor and worship leader for many years. You've worked in the church world for decades now, and I want to learn from you. I want our listeners to glean some information from you from a perspective of leading in the church world. And so, kind of tell me how do you define effective leadership, especially in the church context? Because I myself there are many different definitions of leadership out there. And being a student of leadership, I've kind of heard them all. But from a church perspective, we lead a little bit differently. kind of how do you define effective leadership in the church world?
Well, obviously, John Maxwell said leadership is influence, and I think in all leadership, whether it's church or any other, whether it's your family, whether it's your job, it's influence. And so then we have to ask ourselves, what kind of an influencer am I? And because I mean, gangs have leaders, and so there's all different kinds of leaders. And I would say, to me, I want to be a leader that is real, that's authentic, and that loves without an agenda. And people, are challenging sometimes. Personalities can rub sometimes, and so learning how to lead like Jesus would lead is certainly what I think a pastor kind of leadership should be. How do I love people that are challenging? How do I love people I don't understand? How do I love people I don't relate to? Because if I can truly love them, and when you realize that if God values them, then shouldn't I value them? And if I value them, I've got to find a way to care, love, empower, equip, and bring the best out of them. So, as a pastor, I guess I'm looking for someone who's real, who's honest, who's not trying to act like I've got it all perfect. I think one of the hardest challenges for me early on, but even today, that's pastoring, is you feel like a pastor, you have to have it all together. You feel like you've got to be able to manage money well, manage marriages well, manage children well, do the job well, and then you feel like you've got to have a super spiritual life.
Right.
You have all those areas, and I feel like leadership is sometimes feels like whack-a-mole. You get in a rhythm where you're doing it well for a while, and
Mhm.
then all of a sudden one of those areas of your life pop up, and then when you go to miss that one, now you're missing all of them. And so at one point you feel like, man, I'm doing this pretty good. I've got it all under control. Then the next minute you feel like, man, I'm failing on all cylinders right now. I'm not a good husband. I'm not a good dad. I'm not a good, leader to our staff. I feel like I'm just missing it. So I think people really do accept us to be honest and real and not act like I'm
Yes.
perfect in all these areas.
Yes. So, I mean, I've pastored now for 20 plus years total also, so I'm on the same page with you, and I have seen pastors who try to operate in the church like a corporation would. I kind of call the corporate world kind of a triangle, where at the top of the triangle, which is in the upward, is going to be the leader, and everybody in the bottom underneath is the one that serves the one at the top. But I have found in my studies that true leadership, especially from a perspective of Jesus's leadership model, is the opposite of where the triangle is down, where the leader is actually at the bottom supporting the rest of the team that's at the top. And of course, we've known that as what the title of servant leadership. It's where we're there to really serve those who are serving with us. Do you see that in your dynamic of your church setting and in comparison to other churches that you have ministered in and worked in?
Well, I don't know if I'm qualified to maybe speak in other churches. I definitely see a lot of dysfunction in leadership in churches, but I definitely agree with you that our leadership, really all leadership, should be servant kind of leadership, meaning it's not about you helping me get to where I want to be. It's about me helping you get to where you want to be.
That is so
And I guess I was blessed and fortunate to work for a pastor who did that for me and modeled that for me.
true.
So I literally love watching our team excel and doors opening for them and opportunities opening for them. I actually love that and get excited at it, because I guess one thing I've learned is if that whole team is doing well, then your organization is doing well. And versus if it's just, if it's just me, if it's just everybody, hey, come here, buy into my dream, help make me
Right,
successful. Here's the vision.
right.
You may get that, but you're also going to find people checking out after a year or two, and you're going to lose that team because they want to be a part of something where they're growing as well, not just you. I think it happens a lot, even in pay scale. I've seen churches where the pastor's making all kinds of money and the staff can barely get out the McDonald's,
Yeah.
and I think a true leader is going to put himself in balance with the rest of his team so everybody can grow together.
Yeah. So a true servant leader is not about me, it's about you and it's about
Sure.
others. And I have seen as being in the church world myself for many years, growing up in the church, and you mentioned the word dysfunction. There are some churches that are very dysfunctional, and a church or any organization is only as healthy as the healthiness of the leader is. If the leader is unhealthy, believe me, the team becomes unhealthy as well.
Yeah.
Your church, how is your church set up for leadership? What do you do? What does your leadership team look like? And what do you do as a church leader to pour into them and to train and develop them in their leadership skills and competencies?
Yeah, so obviously when we started the church, it was, a much smaller group. And as the church has grown over the last 11 years, we've added on, the team to where we now have actually paid, people that are a part of that team. And for me, I guess more and more, I look at my job as I'm going to pastor this team, and this team is going to pastor this church. Obviously, my hands are very in it. I'm still loving, caring for people. I'm still taking calls. I'm still praying for people. But I definitely see myself, you know, investing in them. For me, I'm trying to spend time with them. I'm hanging with them. It's not always work. It may be like, for example, today I took our Spanish pastor out for lunch and with two other guys from the church, and we didn't talk about church stuff. We just were hanging together. In fact, I had them meet at my house, and we rode together so we could just, chat and get together and just hang together. I think it's important that our team feels very connected to me and I feel very connected to them. I feel like it's important for me to ask them, what are your dreams? What are your goals? You may not be here forever. So, how can you get the most out of this experience at Infinite? So, wherever you go, it was a pleasant experience for you. And hopefully, everybody's a long time. Most of our staff has been here now quite a while. And I always say that too. If you're going to work for an organization or church, kind of figure out how long the rest of the team has been there, because if it's a quick turnover all the time,
Yep.
that lets you know that there's
Telltale
something,
sign.
dysfunctional there,
Yeah.
that people can't stay on staff for a long period of time.
Yeah, I've always said, and I think I didn't coin this phrase, I wish I did, but I've always heard the phrase success leaves clues. And for me, I added the addition to that of failure leaves clues as well.
Yeah.
You look at any organization, and if there is a lot of turnover of staff and team members, then that's a telltale sign that leadership should stop and pay attention to what is happening and figure out there may be some things wrong. So with you, I noticed you bring in some outside leadership training and development sometimes. You had that recently, right? Someone came in, I think twice so far, kind of refresh my
Yeah.
memory.
So
I talked to so many people.
the second Monday night of every month, we have what we call leadership development. And so every month we take a Monday night and we focus on teaching, developing, and mentoring leaders. So often, if we have a guest speaker in, I'll ask if they can stay over on that Monday to pour into our leaders, not just our staff, but anybody who wants to come and grow and develop leadership abilities and skill sets.
So that's awesome because I know a lot of organizations, especially churches, they don't do any church development or leadership development at all. They don't, the pastor may say, well, just because I meet with you once a week or once a month to go over your job duties and I put a nugget or two in you, they think that's really church leadership. That's just surface level leadership. As a church leader for yourself, what is probably the most rewarding aspect of being a pastor, a church leader over others? Do you have a nugget that you can share with us that would be a very rewarding aspect from you
Yeah,
being a church leader?
I always love it when I see our team growing and trying things and getting better at things. And whether it's a singer, whether it's a worship leader, and you just see them getting more confident in what they're doing. So I had something very interesting the other day. I was telling our worship leader, worship pastor, that I really want us to develop the next generation of singers and musicians. I said, I feel like we need to be very intentional. Otherwise, we'll wake up 10 years from now and the group we have is older and maybe they're, onto other things. And then we've never developed the younger generation. And so I'm always about bringing on that next generation. In fact, that was really part of even planting Infinite Church. So, I said, I really would like for you to, create some kind of plan. So I get a call and said, hey, can you get on a quick Zoom call with us? And I said, sure. So I get on this Zoom call and it's DJ, our worship pastor, Isaac and Will, and another guy named Jake. They're all part of the Infinite Worship team. And they begin to share this whole concept on how they're going to train and develop. Not only, it started out, I just was asking for our young people and students.
Yeah.
But they went from there to saying, hey, we feel like not only can we mentor our people, but we can mentor churches all around us, or for if anybody wants to come for 9 weeks from around the country and be a part of Infinite Worship
Wow.
Institute or university, whatever they wind up calling it. So it'd be like 9 weeks of training on a beginning level, intermediate level, advanced level. And I'm sitting there listening to them and I'm so pumped because it feels like something I would think of and want to do. What pumped me up was the fact that they actually collaborated together and thought of this and they were sharing it with me. And I was just beaming because you now have exceeded my expectations.
Yeah.
And whenever people that you're leading exceed your expectations, I think that is the most rewarding thing as a leader, to see people just kind of blowing your mind with the decisions that they're making and their behaviors or their actions or the way they handled a challenging situation. And that's what inspires me in our team, is watch them handle tough situations and do it with such authenticity and class.
That is so good to hear that story. Some leaders have this mindset that they never want anybody underneath them to exceed or excel above them as a leader. And that's kind of an ego trip, in my opinion, in the fact that for me, and you kind of alluded to this, when people who are underneath me, and I say that not as a dictator or an authoritarian perspective, but when people are serving underneath me and I'm the authority over them, to see them excel to greater heights than even myself, that is so inspiring for me. That motivates me. If I can encourage someone that maybe doesn't have my skill sets or competencies now, but down the road they can excel me in whatever that is, that puts a wind in my sail. And that's kind of what you're saying, right?
Yeah. Yeah. So we had a strategy meeting Monday night, and the strategy meeting was about getting ready for our fall. We don't want to just coast through it. We want to, head into it with a lot of intention. How are we going to attack it? How are we going to evangelize this fall? And then how are we going to disciple those that come this fall? So, one of the statements I said to all of them, as I said, listen, we cannot be leaders who fear that someone is going to take our place. Because if we fear, so I believe that so many churches, they never grow because the piano player is like, I own this place. I've always played the piano. And I'm not about to let this young 20-year-old come and take my place. Or I've always directed this choir. I've always
Right.
been the, one that did children's ministry in this church. We must understand that we've got to duplicate ourselves as leaders. We've got to help people find that same passion and tenacity and responsibility and awareness that we have. We've got to learn how to pass that on to the next generation. And I always feel like if someone gets better at me at something, let me back up. Say someone, hey, I'm going to try to be the pastor. I'm going to try to, create a coup and take this church, from him. Listen, I just don't think people are going to take your position. God has you there, and you're there for a reason. And so I don't lead with fear of who's getting better, who can preach better, who can speak better. I just don't live with that fear. I
That's
just believe that when it's my time, God will let me know that there's another level now, and I just believe that I'll be more fulfilled at that next level than what I am even now, if it's His timing. So here's another thing I heard that I really kind of keep in my mind now. I'm 60 years old, and I don't feel like I'm ready to retire right now. But the statement was, "When do you pass off this church? When do you hand it down to the next leader?" And it's not always when I'm ready, it's when the next leader is ready. If the next leader is ready to go, then I may have to say, okay, it's my turn to step aside.
yeah.
Otherwise, if I say, no, I'm selfishly enjoying this, I love this, this is what I'm doing, I'm going to be the leader. I started this church, this is my church, and if I start with that mentality, then you're going to watch that church go right down. If it's out of the will of God, go right back down and you'll lose it all. But if we're sensitive and realize this is a kingdom thing, especially in church work, this is the kingdom thing. This is not my thing. Yes, God used me to start it, but it's not my church. It's God's church. And whatever moves this church to the next level, then I need to be submissive to that and be ready for that. And I pray to God that I'm that kind of leader that can do that.
That's awesome. That's awesome. So every church has challenges. I mean, we're humans. And you mentioned it earlier that people tend to put pastors and church leaders in on pedestals, like they are perfect, like they are like nothing can go wrong with them because they're pastors, but yet pastors are just as vulnerable to sin and to failure and to mistakes as anybody else. But with challenges also come with friction points, I call it. Points of the church that in the relationships with maybe church leaders that you're serving with or congregational members, these challenges can be not fun. What are some of the challenges that you've experienced in the past, and how have you navigated those challenges? And there are different levels of challenges. There are some
Sure.
challenges that are really extreme challenges, and some that are not so challenging, but they're challenges. How have you identified challenges and dealt with those from your perspective of leading this church?
Okay, great question, because there are a lot of challenges. First of all, I don't think, or let me say this, there's something in every one of my team that I would probably like to see improve. And there's certainly something in me that my team would like to see me improve or change. So you got to realize that there's something in all of us. In a perfect world, we would like to see people deal with better or change more. So challenges, there's been many challenges over the 11 years. Some of them are, I've had my children that have worked with me. And it's wonderful because they're all unbelievably talented, skilled, creative. But because they're my kid, they feel like they can, there's not always the barrier and the respect there, and they can just come in your office, just give you a piece of their mind, on what they think because they're your kid,
Right.
and it returns too. Sometimes I would treat them like my kid and not maybe a staff member, and I would be far more at liberty to say something to them than
Right.
maybe I would to another staff member. So those are challenges. And then with another staff member, they didn't grow up around me. They didn't, they they come from a whole different background, whole different upbringing, and so you got to learn to realize where their strengths are, where their weaknesses are. Um, and then we've had the people we've promoted for the longest time came up within the church. So they really got the DNA and the culture of the church. Recently, as this year, we've brought on a couple and hired a few outside people that really didn't understand the culture of this church. And so it's a challenge for them and a challenge for us to allow them to catch up to our culture and catch up to our DNA, catch up to our work ethic, how we approach things. And we don't have offices in our facility. Our facility is really, really nice, but it's not that big. And so everybody kind of is working at home and working out of coffee houses. And so everybody's, we're not going to micromanage you. And you're dependent on to get your thing done, that your responsibility is over the week. And so first of all, I think trust is so crucial to a healthy staff. They've got to trust you, and you've got to learn how to trust them. And, so I kind of tend to trust people. You're going to have to prove to me that you can't be trusted, versus some leaders will say, I'll give you tiny, tiny little bits and stuff, that prove to me that I can trust you. And that makes people skittish to be able to really go for it. So I'm kind of the opposite. I'm going to trust you. You're going to have to prove to me that you can't be trusted, versus you have to prove to me to trust it. Now I'm going to hand you responsibility. Now, I do think there's a balance there, but ultimately, I believe trust. If you trust people, I think you're going to be surprised at how they exceed those expectations and blow your mind when they feel like you honestly trust them. So I think that's a big piece. And for them as well, they need to learn how to trust me. They need to really learn that my agenda is just not me. My agenda is the vision of this church. And my agenda is also, how can we raise you up to become the leader that you should be, and help you reach your full potential. So there are definitely lots of challenges. Everybody has different personalities. I'm a very ambitious, go get them personality, and my wife, she's a very more blue personality. And how you talk to a blue, and then my daughter and some of our staff are what they would call a green personality. They're very analytical, and they're going to research everything out. And I come in the staff meeting on Tuesday morning with all these, what I think are brilliant ideas. And then, in 5 minutes, they're shutting down everything, saying that'll never work that way. That'll never work that way. And I can get a little discouraged, thinking this was a brilliant idea. I don't want to know, how it's not going to work. I want to know how it's going to work, but I've learned how to trust them, because what I do know is they all want the vision of this church to move forward. And I also know that without the team, I can't do it alone. So, for example, we were having 2 services. We needed to go to 3 services. I felt this, but the team was just digging in their heels. They didn't want to go to 3 services. So for about a year and a half, I kept presenting this vision, kept bringing it back up, let it die for, a month or 2, then bring it back up again, until one day, they're like, okay, we see this, we need to do this. And now, it's a lot of work on all of us, but they work hard and they crush it. And so, sometimes you can't always have it your way. You got to realize you got a great team. They're all qualified in areas that you're not qualified. They definitely see it from a very different view and perspective. And you trust that together we're going to be a great team. Not just me, you all saying yes to me, but together we're going to be a great team.
So you agree in a team player mindset and culture?
Oh, 100%. 100%.
So last question, and we'll kind of start wrapping this podcast up. But imagine that there was a young and up and coming man or woman who's wanting to aspire to be a pastor or church leader, whether it's pastoring full time or being a church lay leader, and they're new and upcoming and they're still very green. As someone like you who's been seasoned, what nugget or two would you give someone who says, "Hey, Mark, I'm coming up to you as this new leader, and I want to be the best leader that I can. What advice do you have for me?"
Yeah,
I know
great
it's a loaded
question.
question, and you can
Yeah,
go on for another hour or two, but kind of narrow it
yeah.
down to a point or two.
I think really listen to the ones you're mentoring to and not listen just to respond, but truly listen to where their heart is and ask them. Tell me, I guess, right in the beginning, I want to know, what are your dreams? What do you want to accomplish? I feel like I was a product of my pastor, asking me that. So many pastors want you to come to get on their staff and buy into my vision and help me make this happen. But I believe a great leader is more about, what is your vision? What is your dream? And how can I help you get to where you want to go? And I know I have people on my team right now that one day will pastor,
Mhm.
and they may not pastor infinite, but they're going to pastor somewhere. So I guess I feel like God has placed them in my care for this period of time. So how can I prepare them and shape them for their next season or their next opportunity? And so to me, I guess I feel like I want to listen to them. What is it they want to do? Where do they feel like their weaknesses are? Where do they feel like their strengths are? And give them opportunities, realizing that they're not going to exceed your expectation in the beginning, not every time, or they could, but but you've got to give them opportunities to fail, right? You got to give them an opportunity to kind of mess up, figure it out. We had someone recently, my wife and I were talking about someone taking a life group, and I said, they need a life group, because there's nothing that will teach you how to lead, or a small group, that will teach you how to lead people more than a small group, because people showing up don't lie. If they don't show up after a while, you realize there's something I got to work on. There's something about my leadership. What John Maxwell says, if they're not following, you're not leading. So small groups are a great place for people to develop and care and love, a group of people. And then, if you're faithful over the small, then you become faithful over the big.
It's such good information. And I know, Mark, we could spend another hour or two on this subject of church leadership and how to be successful at all of this, but we're out of time. And I want to have you back sometime in the future. But thank you for coming and being a part of this podcast. And hopefully, someone will see this and I'm praying that they will be inspired and God would speak to them directly through this podcast and our conversation. So, again, for those of you who are watching, if you would like to purchase his book, just go to Amazon or any of the main book platforms that are out there. It's called Endless Possibilities, The Power of the Nudge, and you can go purchase that. I know the book is going to be a blessing to you. And of course, if you're wanting to know anything more about me and my ministry and the organization that I lead called Lead Well Solutions, you can simply go to this website behind me called ToddMarshallHernsberger.com. I know that is a mouthful, but you can read it on here. I'll put it at the bottom of the screen as well. And you can learn more about that organization that I run, which is a coaching and consulting business for Christian organizations. And of course, I also wrote a book called The Dysfunctional Leader. And so, again, Mark, thank you for being here. So glad that you come. And again, you can follow me on social media on TikTok, Instagram, and Facebook. Just look up the handle ToddTalk.Leader, ToddTalk.Leader. And Mark, how can people get a hold of you besides obviously reading your book? If people wanted to get a hold of you, what's the best way that they can communicate with you?
Yeah, they can connect on Facebook or Instagram. I'm on there, just Mark Condon,
Okay.
and follow along there, or follow the church, Infinite Church, social media. And yeah, would love to have them.
Okay. So reach out to him if you want to communicate with him and have questions. So anyway, thank you guys for being here, and we'll see you on the next Todd Talk. Be blessed, everyone.
God bless.